I just realized that when I went no contact with my mother and then my grandparents, and I lost my brother, my mother's son, I didn't actually have a relationship with him. It's such a weird thing. I never really thought about it before. And I'm always telling people that, in this family estrangement situation that I find myself in, I recognize I didn't lose anybody because I didn't have anybody. They were so busy protecting my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother. I was the scapegoat, the family liar at the age of 4. I never really had them. It was just through comparison that I thought I did. So for example, my favorite aunt who wrote in a birthday card once that she was proud of me, I felt like I had her because of that. And because there were times that she was really nice to me and even affectionate and loving in the limited interactions that we had. And I do genuinely believe that there were times that she did try to intervene and wasn't able to do so. I also know that when push came to shove, when I ended my relationship with my mother, my phone didn't ring. She wasn't calling me. And when I ended my relationship with my grandparents, and to find out a little bit more about that, you can go to the tab, Who the F Was My Grandmother, to get the backstory there. The only thing she called me for was to berate me for not giving my daughter over to them. And incidentally, at that point in time, I had 3 children. And how I was going to give my grandfather a heart attack and how I was killing him by not giving him access. And again, go over to that tab so that you can understand what was going on. And if you guessed it, I bet you guessed it right. My brother, though, I thought he would stand with me. And as I went through therapy, when I was going through the final estrangements, I really wasn't choosing in any way, shape, or form to go no contact with anyone else. It was my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother. I lost everyone. Well, I can't lose what I didn't have. Everyone did what they always did, which was side with all of the abusers. They didn't ask me if I was okay, if there was something that they could do. They didn't take an interest in hearing about anything because they already knew what was going on. But my brother, my mother's son, we grew up in the same house. And I thought I would be able to maintain a relationship that I actually didn't have with him at the time. And I don't even understand why I would have wanted to have a relationship with him, except for that nostalgic amnesia, that memory of we were kids together. He's 5.5 years older than I am. And I looked up to him, and at times he was protective, and at times he was my safe space as much as he could do that. He had 5.5 years with my mother on his own, and he went through one more stepfather than I did. So I can't even imagine what he went through. And on the basis of that, I thought he would stand with me, even though prior to my final no contact with my grandparents, he had called me a liar when I disclosed SA to him. I told him that when I was 12 years old, when I had ended up running away, and the reason I didn't come home that night was because I was held throughout the night by an individual who SA'd me. I'm not saying I would have gone home, but that's why I didn't go home. And he repeatedly, now I'm like 20, 21, maybe 22 at this point. Pretty sure closer to 21. Anyway, neither here nor there. He continually, throughout that conversation, didn't ask me questions, didn't ask me details, just called me a liar. And it didn't dawn on me at that time that he was just repeating what he was taught to know from the time I was a little girl. And I guess what we thought about, victims coming forward and things like that later on back then would not have been a thing. I'm 58, so this is decades ago, right? However, he's had all this time to come around. And of course he hasn't. And if he does now, it doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is the recognition that I grieved over something, a relationship that I actually didn't even have at the time. Because after I got returned home by social services, a little backstory, at 13, I ended up living on the streets for 1.5 years because I ran away from the abuse. And then After that, until the age of 17, I was housed here and there. I paid my own rent. I pulled myself up off the streets, that whole kind of thing. And at 17, when I had my little baby daughter, social services, no questions asked, don't care if I'm safe, don't care what's happening, sent me back into where I was being abused. And no, I didn't tell, because I was terrified at that time that they were going to take my daughter away from me. I was days out of, not even days, hours out of giving birth to my little baby and in the hospital when all of this transpired. I get back and I connect with the entire family, who of course does what? How could you do this to everyone? You better never do this again. Do you know what you put so-and-so through and so-and-so through? Nobody asked me how I survived, or even if I was okay. Not one person, not even the favorite aunts. And after that, I ended up living with my mother in Miami. Now, my brother at this point is 23. He's engaged. He's marrying into a really solid, good family. He's doing very well in his life because he hasn't lived with my mother for years at this point. And at no point in time, not once, not ever, did he pick up the phone and call his little sister, who had gone through all of this trauma, to just say hi, let alone check on me. So why share this story with you? Because I bet that there are a lot of you out there who are grieving sibling relationships right now that aren't actually relationships, and probably never were, or if they were pretty minimal. And you're grieving someone who was groomed to stand with your abuser, particularly if they were the golden child. They had a different childhood experience than you did, and they were groomed to be a different person in relationship to your narcissistic parent than you were. And even in the healthiest of families, we don't have the same parents when we're born, even if we have the same biological parents, because as a mom myself, I have three adult children. And I wasn't the same mom with each of my children. I went through therapy when my youngest was born, so my two older kids got an untherapized, much more immature version of me. Not abusive, by the way. But the point being is, we never have exactly the same cookie cutter relationship, but we are the same loving parent in a healthy dynamic. In an abusive dynamic that includes narcissism in particular, or anything along those lines, because that kind of abuse is so layered, intentional, and insidious, there's a design plan to it. And part of that design is that triangulation, the divide and conquer, to make sure that one of the siblings mirrors the reality of the narcissistic parent, while the other sibling is left going, is up, or down, or sideways, or, and really confused because everybody's ganged up against that child. So if you've lost your sibling, I hate to tell you this, you never had them probably. I look back and there were moments in time where my brother and I had connection, and I don't doubt that he loved me. But he did so in the capacity that he could and with the permission that he had, which was pretty minimal from my mother.